Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for this exciting program. I'm Emily Beeny, Chief Curator of the Legion of Honor, and today it's my great pleasure to introduce this lineup organized by the World Monuments Fund and focused on the resurrection of the Cathedral of Notre-Dame de Paris after the fire of 2019. So on its perch above the Pacific, the California Palace of the Legion of Honor, which this year celebrates its 100th birthday, is of course, in its own strange way, a piece of French architectural patrimony baptized in fire. It is a recreation of the Palais de Salm, the last great Parisian hôtel particulier of the 18th century, constructed on the eve of the French Revolution, set ablaze during the Commune of 1871, and rebuilt in the late 19th century. Following another fire that almost wiped San Francisco from the map at the dawn of the 20th century, the Panama Pacific Exposition helped bring the city back to life in 1915. There, the French pavilion, modeled on the Palais de Salm, provided inspiration for our foundress, Alma de Bretteville-Spreckels, who set out to recreate this recreation of a recreation from permanent materials here at Land's End. The Legion of Honor opened its doors in November 1924 as both an art museum and a marker of Franco-American friendship, a monument to the 3,600 Californians who perished in France during the First World War. What better place for today's conversation? The speakers we will hear from are august. Bénédicte de Montlaur is President and Chief Executive Officer of the World Monuments Fund, the world's foremost private organization dedicated to the preservation of extraordinary places in collaboration with the communities that surround them. Her background, which includes 20 years' service as a senior diplomat in the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, combines culture, politics, international diplomacy, and human rights. Philippe Villeneuve is Chief Architect for the Historic Monuments of France, a role in which he has served since 1997, overseeing and advising on the preservation of architectural patrimony across the country. His projects have included restorations at the cathedrals of Angoulême and Limoges, at the Abbey of Saint-Amand-de-Bois, at the Church of Notre-Dame in La Sutraine, and at the Château de la Rochefoucauld. Since the fire, he has led the extraordinary restoration efforts at Notre-Dame de Paris. Barry Bergdoll is the Meyer Shapiro Professor of Art History at Columbia University and a specialist in modern architectural history. In exhibitions at the Canadian Centre for Architecture and at the Museum of Modern Art, where he served as Philip Johnson Chief Curator for 5 years, Bergdoll has offered exhibitions on subjects including Mies van der Rohe, the Bauhaus, Henri Labrouste, Le Corbusier, Latin American post-war architecture, and Frank Lloyd Wright. A member of the Pritzker Prize Committee, he is currently preparing an exhibition on Eugène-Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc, who led the last major restoration effort at Notre-Dame in the 19th century. And finally, Jane Williams is Director of Conservation at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. She joined the staff in 2017 after serving as head of collections and conservation at the Phoebe Hearst Museum of Anthropology at the University of California, Berkeley. She has held various conservation appointments at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco, at the Brooklyn Museum, at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and at the Walters Art Museum. She has also worked as an archaeological conservator on site in Italy and Turkey. Please join me now in welcoming Madame de Montlaur.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here in such a beautiful day. Me and my co-speakers, we came from New York, and it was such a pleasure to be in San Francisco under the sun. Cannot believe the weather you have, and especially being driven by a driverless car like that, you feel you're really in San Francisco. But it's even, for me as a French citizen, you can hear my accent. I feel I'm here on a little piece of land of France. So thank you to the Museum of Fine Arts for welcoming us. It's so fitting to have this lecture today on Notre-Dame Cathedral at the Musée de la Légion d'Honneur. So thank you. So as Emily just said, World Monuments Fund is a leading organization preserving heritage around the world with communities. We are headquartered in New York, so I'm not in France, despite this accent. I'm based in New York, but we have offices and branches in 8 different countries, in Peru, in India, in France, in the UK, Spain, Portugal, and we just registered in China as well, and we've been for a very long time in Cambodia. So what we do is working with communities who need it to preserve their heritage. It can be sometimes a place as big as this museum. We are in Angkor at the Forbidden City in China, and sometimes it's small vernacular architecture. But all of those places are essential for local communities' identity and for the rest of the world as well. So that's why we thought that it was going to be very fitting to have our annual series of lectures on Notre-Dame. This year is even more special because we are celebrating our 60th anniversary at World Monuments Fund. We've restored more than 800 places in 112 countries. And we thought, like, what could be the best lecture this year to celebrate the values of heritage? And I think what happened at Notre-Dame was a perfect illustration of why we care for heritage. All of you in this room, you remember where you were when you saw the first images of Notre-Dame in flames, because it was so shocking. I was in Louisiana with my family. And I think there is no better example of to remind us that we should care for heritage. We take it for granted. We think it's there forever. No, it's a constant care of every day. So today we're going to hear about the lessons learned of Notre-Dame, what has happened in this extraordinary restoration project. This is the most important restoration project of the century on many different ways in terms of finances. Philippe Villeneuve was telling me they've spent 800 million in 5 years. That's quite a lot of money, because you had, in fact, many restoration projects at the same time. I have to say that America has been exceptional in its generosity. The number 1 donors outside of France were Americans. They gave 67 million euros. So for that, I want to thank all of you. Because American philanthropy is really an extraordinary thing we have in this country, and that allows so many projects to happen. We're going to hear all the reasons why this project was exceptional. So first of all, I want to welcome to the stage Barry Bergdoll. You heard his full presentation. He's also an extraordinary human being and a perfect professor, and is going to give you the historical background of Notre-Dame and what burned on that April 5th, 2019. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not the only art historian in the room, so as you... Oh, sorry. I'm not the only art historian in the room, so as you know, art historians are incapable of speaking without images behind them. So I am the warm-up act to Philippe Villeneuve. My job is in a few minutes to give you 1,000 years of the history of Notre-Dame. And then Philippe, who performs miracles, is going to slow down and tell you what he managed to do in only 5 years, which is absolutely extraordinary. And if you haven't been to Paris, the lines to get into Notre-Dame are now enormously long, but you must go and see this extraordinary transformation. But I think the key thing that I want to tell you in the warm-up to Philippe's talk about the work that he's been doing there with a cast of thousands is that in the many centuries before that, Notre-Dame was a monument in movement. So this, without going into this in detail, you need to go to a local university for a medieval architecture course, but I wanted just to point out the fact that Notre-Dame evolves over about 150 years from the initial construction of what we can see now to emerge as a building that we think of as having an incredible unity as a Gothic cathedral. But it is in fact the end result of a series of modifications and changes, moving basically from the East End, which we're looking at the East End, the apse end here with its famous flying buttresses, towards the West End and the 2 towers and the great facade reached by the end of the 13th century, at which point also the chapels are extended at the East End. So this is a period, the golden period of the construction of medieval cathedrals, the birth of the Gothic in the Ile-de-France. If anyone has had a undergraduate art history lecture, you've spent some time there, or if you've spent time in France, you've gone on the tour of these buildings, of which Notre-Dame is often considered the flagship and in some ways the perfect, most unified example. But it has not always been so. In fact, for a long period after the completion of Notre-Dame, Gothic began its slow decline into disfavor. And so it's hard for us to imagine a moment when Notre-Dame was not beloved, not only for what it represented, but for literally its physical form. And yet, particularly in the 17th and the 18th century, there was a great ambivalence about the forms of Gothic architecture. We think of it today as one of the great achievements of French architectural history, but this was absolutely not the case in the 17th century. Louis XIII and Louis XIV, in fact, undertook a considerable amount of work in Notre-Dame. It was extremely important to them for dynastic reasons, for political reasons, but this was a period when Gothic is considered, in fact, barbaric. But it is also a period when politically the monarchy associates itself very powerfully with the Virgin Mary, with Notre-Dame. In 1638, in the middle of a war with Spain, Louis XIII, in hopes for an heir, places the entire kingdom under the protection of the Virgin, bringing huge attention and works to Notre-Dame Cathedral, including a major reworking of the East End. And this would continue once Louis XIV renews the vow in 1650, leading to even more work, notably the sculptural work of the Pietà. I think you'll see that with Philippe in a moment, and a work that represents Louis XIII offering his scepter and his crown to the Virgin. But I think if you look at these two images, two paintings that record events at Notre-Dame, on the left you can see not only these great paintings that were commissioned as a gift to the cathedral and to continue its decoration in a much more up-to-date aesthetic. They were so-called May paintings that were offered on the Feast of the Virgin on the 1st of May, but they're deliberately hung in such a way as to obscure the Gothic architecture. So gradually, we're going to have this kind of draping of works of art of a very different aesthetic that begin to modify, to, in a sense, ameliorate and hide. And we get here at the famous coronation ceremony in which Napoleon is about to crown himself Emperor of France, the Sacre in 1802, recorded by David here. I'm bringing it in not for a quick lesson on the French Empire, or for that matter, for the return of Notre Dame from its saddest years during the Revolution, when it became a temple of reason and was degraded in some ways that we'll see in a moment. But you are in fact in the apse. So as you can see, the Gothic piers have been covered up to become neoclassical. There's an attempt to change the aesthetic. So as much as Notre Dame is incredibly important, Napoleon chooses to crown himself there, it is aesthetically in a period of a great lack of appreciation. So such is the state of Notre Dame circa 1800. These are images from the beginning of the 19th century. You can see the drawing in the center that the cathedral has lost its spire. There'll be a lot of discussion about the spire. Those of you who remember the horrible events of 2019 remember the moment when the spire crashed through the vault in the conflagration. The cathedral much degraded. This is one of the earliest photographs we have, a daguerreotype that was taken, in fact, to serve for the campaign for restoration. There are a number of things that I think are important to point out here. One, as you can see immediately, that the spire is gone. Also, during the Revolution, the Gallery of Kings, of course the monarchy here symbolically decapitated, were removed, and a lot of the sculptural work has been stripped of the cathedral, in some ways simplified, a lack of maintenance. The cathedral was, in fact, almost on the brink of collapsing in parts, when a great change of attitude takes place, a change of attitude that we associate with French Romanticism, with the revival of an interest in medieval architecture, but particularly the notion that medieval architecture represented a spirituality with the reestablishment of the church. And so finally, with the institution of a commission on historic monuments in the 1830s, the decision is made to restore Notre-Dame Cathedral. Certainly Victor Hugo's famous novel, one of the first novels ever to have a building rather than a person as its hero, Notre-Dame de Paris in 1831, is part of this movement. On the right, you see a photograph of another photograph of the building just on the eve of the restoration, and this will be confided in two youngish architects, Jean-Baptiste Lassus and, of course, Viollet-le-Duc, whose name came up. Together, they will begin the restoration around 1844-45, and you can see their work will consist of replacing the lost row of kings here above the door. They're going to replace the trumeau, which had been removed to allow for royal passage to go through a single door, and they are going to speculate on the possibility of putting back all the sculptural work that had disappeared, all of the floral ornaments, as well as even rebuilding the spire, which had disappeared sometime in the late 18th century due to lack of maintenance. So here the ideal, I think when I want to leave you with maybe one main thought that we'll take into hearing about how Philippe confronted what do I do after the fire in April of 2019, and that is the notion, should Viollet-le-Duc restore the cathedral to some kind of notion of the ideal cathedral, such as you see him illustrating here in this amalgam of the finest features from a number of cathedrals in the Ile-de-France, published in his famous Dictionnaire, or should he allow the cathedral to show off some of the variety of choices that were made as the building had evolved over 150 years? In other words, what constituted the fabric of Notre-Dame? What should be put on display with this rising notion of the historic monument? And Notre-Dame is one of its greatest examples, a building that is as much to be a national symbol as a architectural and a religious symbol. If we move ahead, this is one of my favorite photographs of Notre-Dame. We're here at the end of the Second Empire, probably around 1869. You can see that Viollet-le-Duc's spire is now complete, much higher than anything known to have existed. He began suddenly to feel as though he had so understood the language of Gothic in making the cathedral whole again and in understanding and studying its structure, that he could, as he would put it, speak Gothic and begin to create new parts to make the building once again, he says, to restore it to the glory it deserves. What I like about this photograph is you see him competing with the Pantheon, as though he's going to say the great Gothic monument of Paris can compete with the dome of the now, we might say, pagan architecture of the neoclassical period. But we also see in the foreground the great urban works of the Second Empire that are beginning the idea, very French, of the dégagement, to liberate, to free up the space that a historic monument should have. Just as a picture needs a frame around it to say this is a work of art, a work of architectural art needs a frame of space around it. So this 19th century idea very much in the way we appreciate the cathedral today. So as I said, the main idea I want to give us to work with as we hear what Philippe has thought about, worked, coordinated over a 5-year period is, should the cathedral be returned to a moment of perfect stylistic purity, the kind of 19th century ideal of the ideal cathedral in the Middle Ages, a romantic construct, or might it actually tell some of its own history? And one of the most telling moments is when Viollet-le-Duc decides, I think you can just see it here, if you compare at the crossing, these 4 bays around the crossing of the nave and the transept there, and if we look at this earlier 19th century print, you see that he's changed the nave elevation for this 4-partite elevation. He believed that that had been the state of the earlier phase of the Gothic cathedral, that it had been changed after he thought a fire. Philippe doesn't think this fire actually took place, but he wanted, in fact, for this cathedral to tell its story. So this tension between restoring a monument to a perfect moment in the past or allowing it to relate something of its story, to narrate itself, if you will, to make the cathedral speak. To make the cathedral speak for him involved 3 last things that I want to show you in my warm-up act. One was to recreate the whole panoply of sculptural form from the scale of the famous chimères and gargoyles, the monsters that reside on the upper reaches of the cathedral, to restore all of the floral ornament, the whole, if you might say, bestiary and world of nature that bristled across the cathedral surfaces, and likewise his belief that in the Middle Ages, the great cathedrals and even parish churches had been brightly painted. The color played a key role, and he restored what was completely missing. He recreated the color scheme of the chapels throughout the cathedral, some of which had just been cleaned before the fire 6 years ago. And finally, last comment, with this idea of dégagement or freeing up. He had an urban scheme. Once again, I think we'll hear in discussion, an urban scheme is part of the consideration of the next phase of Notre-Dame, in which buildings would be cleared away, a great space around it. So look at the 19th century image of the cathedral that emerges from the fabric of the city, and Viollet-le-Duc's projects only partially realized to clear space, to create a park around the building, to create a frame for the appreciation of the cathedral, in a way detached from its urban fabric, even as it became the symbol of, for him, what was the grandest monument ever contributed to the landscape of Paris. So with that, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Philippe, who is the person who has saved Notre-Dame, so that we can again have this discussion. Building, I think, not only on the Middle Ages, but building on his predecessor, Viollet-le-Duc.
Yeah. It's a French touch. Yeah. That's terrible. I don't see anybody. Thank you very much. I thank you because of many things. The first, I thank you for all Americans who give many money to the restoration of Notre-Dame, and it's for me very important to say you thank you, because without all this help of American, yes, but everywhere in the world, we couldn't see Notre-Dame so quickly as today. Because yes, I'm going to speak to you about the 5 years of restoration of Notre-Dame in a few minutes, and very short, but these 5 years were also very short to restore such cathedral, because President Macron said we can rebuild this cathedral, so we did. So I present all people who will help me in my team. It's an architect, some engineers, and two architects who help me. Here you have Pascal Prunet, me, and Rémi Chaumont. Rémi Chaumont drew all the carpenter of the nave and the church, so that's why we could restore precisely all the forêt. On dit la forêt en français, the forest. And Pascal rebuilt the vaults. So me, I was the chief of this orchestra, and I saw all the work. And if we could, as you said before, do so quickly this work, it's because we have many money, and but we had to do chantier work. Chantier. Construction, évidemment. So I don't know if it's very funny for you, but I don't speak English. I don't, yes, so I continue. Here is the cathedral just after the fire. So you can see on this the vaults and the hall of the nave, the hall of the vaults in the transept, the scaffold were around the spire here, and here you can see the structure of the scaffolding after the fire. Here you can see the inside view. It's very important because you can see here the color of the stone, you can see the water in the wall, and the color of the light, the white light in this cathedral. It's never happened since the construction of the cathedral. So it was terrible, and here you can see the piece of wood of the spire. Here it's a very symbolic picture, because you can see among the wood, the stone, the iron, the statue of Notre-Dame de Paris. And here you can see two important things that I saw just after the fire. It was very important, because if I didn't saw that, perhaps the cathedral collapsed. You can see here the wood of the spire. When she falls from the high, she destroys this vault, and the wood fall down here, so here, and they continue to burn near the stones of the pillar, and you can see the stones completely destroyed. And perhaps if these stones could, si ces piliers devaient s'affaisser,
if those pillars should collapse,
all the cathedral fall down. So it was very important to act immediately. So that's why we did many things to many works. So here, it's the first element we did. It's with the wood beside this wall of stone. And before you had the roof, but the roof fall down, but this wall can fall down in the street. You can see here the streets, the apartments. So it was the first things. Here we put the, oh, je suis fatigué. We put les poutres, the beam. And here you can see several sculptures, fantastic, of Viollet-le-Duc, the chimère. But you can see here the state of the stone because the fire burned all the stones. And with this element, we empêché, je sais plus.
Keep them from.
J'ai rien compris.
We keep them from falling.
Ah yes, voilà. I'm sorry. And after, here you can see after the roof, we put a roof because the fire, it was the first act against the stones, but after we have the water and after you of the firemen, and after you can have the rain. So we put this little roof. So quickly, very quickly. So and a cathedral is a structure, is a dynamic structure. So if you something fall down, it's very dangerous because all is completely en déséquilibre. Unbalanced. Il faut que j'en retienne. So it's that's why excuse me. That's why we draw some elements like it, because if the walls fall down, this fly buttress continue to push the wall. So it was dangerous because the wall could fall down in the nave or in the core. So that's why we put these elements in under each scaffolding, each flying buttress. So you can see the elements, metallic, and after the element of wood under each flying buttress. After we had to pull off the scaffolding, very dangerous structure of metal, above the crossing, and this structure stand 1 year after the fire. It was very difficult to remove because it was dangerous. It was a structure burnt, and we had pollution of leads. So le plomb, c'est bien lead. Excuse me, lead. So it was in a very difficult conditions that you have to climb in the structure, and you can see here two échafaudeurs. Alors scaffolders.
People who make scaffolding.
Franchement, j'aurais pu le faire. I could say that. Alors, je vais continuer. So you can see here the progression of the work and the end. So you can see the wall. And it was very important. This structure was very important because before I asked to the man who conceived the scaffold, I didn't want the structure repose to lay on the roof or on the spire. I didn't want. So I just wanted that the structure. J'ai déjà oublié, dis donc. Lay on this part. And that's why when the spire fall down, the wood fall, but not the scaffold. So that's perhaps the thing who will save the cathedral of most destructions. I continue very quickly. Here you can see very important stones. Here you have 4 stones. Here you can see the lid. And after you destroy this part, and from these several stones, Viollet-le-Duc built a pillar. He continues the pillar of the crossing, and it's on these 4 elements that the spire has been built. And in here you need many scaffolds. So it's a cathédrale d'acier. Une cathédrale d'acier.
A steel cathedral.
A steel cathedral, excuse me, I'm very tired. So, and after the flying buttress, it's the vaults. You have to prevent the vaults of destruction. So we built this carpenter structure, and it's the same structure that in the Middle Age they used. It's an arch, very precise, and the very important thing is that before the fire we had 3 dimensions information relevée. Surveys. So we know exactly at the centimeter how was the vault, at what height, and the drawing of the arch. It's very precious for us, so I can say that we rebuilt exactly the vaults of the cathedral during the restoration. And here you can see the structure. Here it's above that we rebuilt this part of the vaults. Here it's the apse of the cathedral, you know. After the work concerned also the inside, because in the cathedral there was only 3 parts of the vaults destroyed, the carpenter and the roof. But the roof was in lead, and lead made many dust, very poisonous. So everywhere of the cathedral, you found leads. So it was very dangerous. So we had to clean all the wall, all the vaults, all the mobilier, all the wood, the painting, the windows, everything of this cathedral was cleaned with a vacuum. An aspirator, a vacuum cleaner, but very strong, and it was not enough, and so we put on the wall latex everywhere, and we have a very funny surprise, because in a chemical reaction, latex on the certain parts of the wall, you can see here, like fantôme, je sais plus. Ghost. Mais je vous jure, je le savais avant. I knew this word before, but ghost. So you can see here vestige, ghost of Viollet-le-Duc's decoration for a ceremony for Napoleon III. And here also. But when we pull off the latex, these elements disappears, but they are also in the stone. And here, little details of the color before on the wall. And after this restoration, you can see here how was the wall with a join, very brown, and the stone more blonde. And after restoration, we had this element because we paint all the joints of the wall. After, you can see the difference before, after cleaning, and after restoration. It's in a vault, but it's the same thing on the vault, on the wall, everywhere. Here you can see one of the chapel. It's before and after we have cleaned the painting. We began to fall, and after restoration, it's this. And here you can see the color of the stone with many dust and the join here. And all the join were painted in green by Viollet-le-Duc. So you can imagine the color of the stone here with the join gray. That was terrible. So we paint all the wall, all the join for the harmony. And here you can see it's a painting. Here it's the real color of the stone. So you can see the subtleties of Viollet-le-Duc. We make enter the stone in the color and the color in the stone. It's a genius. After we are going to speak of the spire. These three pictures show just one thing. These two photographies show the spire just after achievement. You can see here the part of the roof is not achieved. Here, yes, but not here. But the important thing here is the color of the statues, because you can see the spire is gray and the statues are brown. But before the fire, you can see that the spire begin black and the statues begin green. It's normal, it's cuivre.
Copper.
Copper, yes, it's in copper. So it's oxidation natural. So, oh, je le fais. Oh, je le fais. Non, je suis trop long. I'm too long. Yes, well. Here you can see one of the statues we pull off a few days after the fire. And here you can see the inner of the structure. I have not time, but you have a real links between these statues and Miss Liberty in New York. Et ben voilà. And here you can see the statue, one of the most important statues, because around the spire, Viollet-le-Duc drawn the 12 apôtres. Beeny, on dit ça chez vous comme ça?
Pardon, excusez-moi.
Les 12 apôtres.
Ah, les apôtres. The apostles. Yeah.
Ben voilà, the apostles. And here you can see it's Viollet-le-Duc himself. It's the only statue we show his spire. I like it. Yes, it's very good. I'm very happy. And he is not also today is not in front of his spire, but in some weeks or months, Viollet-le-Duc will return in front of his spire, and there is a surprise. So in this slide, you can see the different phases of reconstruction of the spire, the same assemblages that in the beginning of Viollet-le-Duc, the same element. It's also genius. Here you can see the drawing of the roof of the carpenter. Here it's a medieval nave, medieval choir, and the 19th century carpenter of Viollet-le-Duc. Here the reconstruction with the same materials, the same technicals, and the same, je l'ai demandé hier soir, je l'ai oublié, outils, tools. Je pouvais les... I learned this word yesterday, I forgotten. And it's very, for me, very important to show you that, because if I show you this charpent, you can absolutely not imagine that there are 5 years ago it was in fire. It's a new forest, and the same that in the 12th century. So I'm very happy because it's like there was no fire there 5 years ago. Here you have another very important symbol of the reconstruction is the spire we rebuild. And when I spoke to you about the 4 pillars, it's for this piece of wood here. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just the 4, the only one point where the spire stay. C'est français? And now you have the roof with a decoration of leads. After we rebuild the vault of the crossing with the angels, you can see the original with a plaster and a new sculpture. Here you have the chimeras that I show you in the beginning, completely destroyed with fire. You can see the fractures. Here you have a 3-day reconstitution, and here you have the new sculpture. Here the stained glasses, all the steels, restored, removed and restored. Here you have the great organ, so you can add all the chantier, and it's not one chantier at Notre-Dame, it's several chantier, perhaps 13 or 20. Here you have some elements of the decoration. You are in the chapel with the Viollet-le-Duc's decoration, monuments of 18th century. Here you have the restoration of the May, the May that Barry explained you. And here you have the decoration of Viollet-le-Duc, painting which is very important at Notre-Dame because it's a translation of the relics of Saint Marcel. Saint Marcel is one of the patron, chief of the church, Parisian church. Here you have a Saint Geneviève, Genovefa. And after, alors là voilà, before, after. Qu'est-ce que c'est que ce trait bleu? Here is the hole that you saw at the beginning of this presentation, the spire. And if you look at the vaults now, you absolutely cannot make the distinction between the old vaults and the new vaults. So I don't know, it's here. After, it's a complete vault of the crossing, completely destroyed and completely restored. Here is a part of the vault of the nave, and here the north part, the north part of the vault destroyed completely and completely restored. And the cathedral as she is now. And I want to speak to you about the element, the rooster, before the spire, just before, and after I found it le lendemain, the day after, studio. And the new rooster I drawn all began from this little sketch. And after I take the end of sculpture and I said, I want this, I want this, I want this. And he did that. I said, yes, okay, it's exactly what I wanted. And attends, on va rigoler un coup, là. Oh là, on va rigoler. And it's not finished because, as you know, all architects have a very big. So Viollet-le-Duc is not also in au pied de sa flèche, at the feet of the spire, and in some day, some months future. Je parle pas bien hein, aujourd'hui, c'est une horreur. Hein. Pas bien. Ils vont plus vouloir après. You see here the Viollet-le-Duc is in front of here the spire and oh yes, but hello. It's not. Yes, it's perhaps my face, but there is no datation, no symbol of architect, and no name. So, but it's symbolized in reality. It's not Philippe Villeneuve. It's all the companions, all the architects, all people who contribute to rebuild this cathedral. And our job was to rebuild Notre-Dame as it was before the fire, and before the fire, it was the Viollet-le-Duc's cathedral. Even the clergy destroyed today, again, the work of Viollet-le-Duc. I'm here to say no. And to finish, I could offer to you this medal, but I did this medal for all the companions who worked with me to the reconstruction, and you can read merci à toi, thank you to you, for all the companions who contribute to the rebirth. C'est facile, rebirth of Notre-Dame, bon, gna gna, moi. And here you can see all the two dates and the rooster. And it finished.
Okay, so thank you, Philippe, and your English is excellent. Stop being intimidated. So I think I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then I will open it to you also, because I'm sure you have some burning questions. So first of all, it's a masterpiece of preservation, restoration. We do at World Monuments Fund a lot of preservation projects. I can tell you, they always take, the biggest one takes 30 years. This one should have taken 30 years. So it's really extraordinary that it was done in 5 years. I think everybody has to understand that. And because it's not one preservation project, it's 20 of them at the same time. Sometimes you had 1,000 people there. So, and everybody sees preservation as a linear thing. You just bring back something that was before. But I guess you started understanding that it's not as easy as that. You have to make decisions all the time. So I just want to ask the three of you, and to give Jenny, also a restorer here, and in charge of conservation of objects and paintings. And I think it's a bit the same. So what has to stay and what has to go? So what would be your response to that in a preservation process?
It's one of the things that is most interesting about this work, I think, these dialogues. And I just want to take a moment to thank Philippe, because I have to say, as someone who is part of a team that has a little bit of an understanding of what it takes, it really was a wonder to see how quickly and magnificently this work happened. Yes, it starts with this question of how these artworks hold their meaning and value, right? And then people are very much a part of it. It's who informs our sense of the the meaning and value of an artwork. So those people need to be part of decisions about preservation. And then we begin to develop an understanding of that. And so it is through working with our curators and working with historians who know the history of these artworks, with the communities who still use and value these artworks. With contemporary artists, our work often starts with artist interviews. We want to understand, where is the tangible and intangible value of your work? How do you want it preserved for the future?
Do you have one example of one thing here, one object of art, where you had to make some decisions like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are working in the centennial year on a number of more involved restoration projects, actually several involving the French collections here. And there is one that was recently completed, and I hope you will take the time to enjoy upstairs in the galleries, was an 18th century canapé or sofa commissioned by Marie Antoinette. It had very hard times over the 200 years from when it was made until the 1950s when it came into the collection. And at that point, it was just a bare frame with traces of paint and gilding. Obviously not something you could show not displayable in our galleries. So there was this question of how do you resuscitate it? How do you make it something that can do its job, which is to represent the best of 18th century decorative arts to our visitors. And we were fortunate. It took, first of all, a major gift, right? Because you can't do this intensive project without additional support. But we were very lucky to have involved in the research and conversation Xavier Bonnet, who was a textile historian and very skilled upholsterer himself, who had worked in the archives of Versailles and on the collections of Versailles, so he could create the design that guided this group of, it really became an international collaboration, almost recreating in some ways the guild of a group of people with specialized skills.
Yeah, so very often it's rebuilding, it's reconstruction, it's recreation, but you try to be as faithful as you can. So did you have to make some very difficult decisions, Philippe, of things you let go, things that had to go away, you couldn't preserve them, and things you could keep?
I think, yes, I think that this work was very not so complicated because, as you saw, there was, that's terrible to say that, but we lost, yes, a roof, a carpenter, some parts of the vaults, and that's all. All the cathedral was saved, but there was pollution. And structurally, it's very important to see if one thing change. Perhaps the consequences could be important at the other side of the monument. So we had to be very vigilant.
Be very careful.
We had to work very carefully, but we hadn't time. So we had to do the reflection very quickly and decide very quick. And sometimes I hadn't many time to decide. But I had the chance also to have many companions who worked near me from the first day. And when I said I want to do that, they helped me to conceive the thing, and we did the thing immediately. So that like it, we began the work very quickly. And after, I never imagined to rebuild another spire than the Viollet-le-Duc spire, because personally I like this spire. For me, it's a masterpiece, beautiful, with a perfect style, wonderful structure, And Viollet-le-Duc is an architect who considers that the proportion was not good with the little spire, but he gave the just proportion to the cathedral. It's an architect. After, it's an historic and archaeological specialist. He drew all the details of the spire in the just style. It's not bad. I often say that nobody knew that the spire was 19th century's masterpiece.
Yeah, because that's always the thing, is that what you restored was, so a debate we often have, is it a medieval cathedral or a 19th century cathedral? The spire was 19th century. So for those of you who remember, there was a huge debate when just after the fire about having a contemporary gesture, a contemporary intervention, and you had all those drawings about what could be the spire, and then a decision was made under the leadership of Philippe to keep the original fire. And now there is a new debate about the stained glasses, because some...
On avait dit qu'on n'en parlait pas.
Because some, people want to include like contemporary creation, so now there is a debate about some of the stained glasses being replaced by some contemporary stained glasses. So what do you think of that, Philippe?
C'était quoi le mot alors, I have an idea. I think something about it. But even if I of the other side of the planet, I am, comment on dit, je suis un fonctionnaire.
He's saying that he's a civil servant, so he cannot comment on it. So I'm going to turn, because he's still employed by the Ministry of Culture and he wants to remain so. So I'm going to turn to Barry. Barry, you know all the periods of this cathedral, and it's been transformed over and over again, and sometimes to magnificent results. So what do you think of that, adding some contemporary intervention in the cathedral?
It's a very paradoxical situation because, of course, restoration itself has a history. And values and thoughts about restoration have changed, let's say, in the 150 or nearly 200 years that the word has been used in something the way we use it now. In fact, Viollet-le-Duc was the first person ever to include an entry on the word restoration in his dictionary on architecture. And he starts by saying restoration, both the thing and both the word and the thing are new. They are modern. To restore a building is a modern concept of a new appreciation for history. Viollet-le-Duc fell out of complete favor in the middle of the 20th century. Had an incredible renaissance of appreciation, I would say, in the 1970s and 1980s. So I, for one, was completely stunned when, after the fire, people said, "Well, we don't need to keep the parts by Viollet-le-Duc. That's 19th century." And the spire became, as you said, one of the chief flashpoints, so to speak, of this, as President Macron was very persuaded that there should be a 21st century element in the cathedral. Happily, that was defeated, and that desire was displaced to the stained glass windows, which is now the subject of controversy about which Philippe cannot speak, but I have rather strong views, which is, I think, there are places in the cathedral where you could add a 21st century window, maybe in the upper reaches, maybe in the towers. But to take out Viollet-le-Duc windows is not only, in my view, not a 21st century approach to restoration, it is a violation of the UNESCO protocols. It runs the risk of provoking a debate in UNESCO over whether the World Heritage Site designation is actually against the Venice Charter. So the work of Viollet-le-Duc is an integral part of the monument, and there is no need to take out. And the argument is that these stained glass windows don't have subjects in them. They're not narratives. They're not stories. They're grisailles. They're plain frames. Viollet-le-Duc didn't do them without frames because he ran out of things to illustrate. He did them because he wanted a certain quality of light there. He wanted a certain hierarchy of images. So it is actually to in a way, to deface Viollet-le-Duc's integral element of the medieval 19th century cathedral. Philippe, I think, except for a couple of small, wonderful gestures like the one he ended with, has not operated as a 21st century Viollet-le-Duc restorer, but he has paid as much attention to Viollet-le-Duc as he has to the Middle Ages. I don't know if that answers your question.
That totally answers it, and if you want to know more, you can go online. There is a gigantic debate about that. So as of now, the idea is to have an artist, a French artist living in Los Angeles, producing those stained glasses. I just think it's a really interesting debate. Can you tell us also what were the surprises? I think there was one extraordinary discovery that I'm not sure everybody is aware of that was made during the restoration. So I just want you to tell our audience about that.
The cathedral is wonderful because she continued to give us new marvelous thing. And when we do studies and prospection to know if the scaffolding for rebuild the spire we weighed, 600 tons, and grow up to 100 meters. We had to know on what we can put this structure, and that's why we begin to do archaeological research, and we discover a wonderful piece of stone with a color, the blue, the red, the wonderful, and we have yes, if you want.
So basically, they had to do an archaeological dig when they rebuilt the spire, and they just found le jubé.
Le jubé, oui. Il y en a d'autres, tu peux même, il y en a d'autres. Oui, j'ai vu qu'il y en avait d'autres. Voilà.
And they are all on display at the Musée de Cluny in Paris.
Yes, and it's wonderful because it's in Cluny you have some stones that Viollet-le-Duc discovered, but since they has been cleaned, but here you can see the real color. And you can see the blue, the red, the gold, and the face of the Christ dead. It's here it's the Christ dead, with the eyes closed. And it's a wonderful picture.
And this is when they were just discovered, right?
And that's why, because of these stones, I think now we need a museum of Notre-Dame de Paris, because yes, President Macron said we want to perhaps have a reflection on this museum, but now I think the reflection have to be deeper. And I'm the first man who wants this museum, because all the work need a museum to explain what is Notre-Dame.
And that's part of what's next for Notre-Dame, because what you don't maybe realize is that they restored just a part, everything that was touched by the fire, but Notre-Dame was collapsing before. They have already started other projects of restoration, all the exteriors. So there is much more work to be done, but what has been restored in 5 years is the damage that happened because of the fire. There will also be a whole project of landscape around Notre-Dame. So we have another of this lecture, but with Basmet also will be added to the panel on Wednesday in New York at St. John the Divine, if you want to follow online, because he will explain his whole projects for the surrounding of Notre-Dame. So there is much more in the future. It's not finished, and it's never finished with a project like that. So maybe I will take a few questions. Okay, I've just said it, so 2 questions. Okay. In the audience, if you have a question, you just rise and ask your question. Thank you, and I will repeat the question for the people who are online. So the question for you, Philippe, is to know, because this was happening in the 21st century, did you have opportunities to use contemporary materials? Because you made a big effort of using medieval techniques and materials, but did you have those opportunities and did you seize them to use contemporary materials?
It's a question that we ask naturally. Or that somebody says everywhere, you have to use concrete, you have to use steel because the fire don't touch this material. The chapel of Notre-Dame was built in 12th century and in wood. And this wood could continue encore many years, centuries. You can imagine that this structure had 8th century. But for example, if you want to rebuild a roof in concrete, you can go to Reims, the Cathedral de Reims in France, we was destroyed during the First World War. And because we had in men, we had in wood, we had in train, we hadn't more road, they decided to build a concrete structure. Not completely a structure, but it was inspired, je sais pas si ça se dit ça, from Renaissance structure, Philippe Villeneuve. It was some element that you add with little clavets. This structure has been built in the beginning of just a few years after the end of the war. Here we had to restore this chapel because the concrete is in a very bad state. So we have to rebuild, to restore. The chapel of Notre-Dame has been never restored, just perhaps sometimes reparation. And today, you know that we pay attention in France about the carbonic gas and the climatic change. To build a charpent in concrete or steel, you made many pollution. But with the wood, you cut the tree, you put une graine, un gland, vous plantez.
You put a seed in the floor, you put a seed.
Voilà, you put a seed. And after you have a tree, so it's very ecological. And about the roof, the leads, it's also, yes, it's perhaps a surprise, but it's also ecologic material because you can use and use again and again the same lead to restore, to repair a roof of steel. So, and for the style, for the design, the decoration, this material is the best to do gargoyles, hook, or other elements of decoration.
So as you can see, Philippe is not at all a Viollet-le-Duc of this century because he didn't try to change anything. Because he was very faithful, it's true, to accept the rooster. Second and last question. Do you have a question? If not, I'm going to conclude. Is there one? I don't
Thank
see.
you. Hi there. Was there any, you mentioned towards the end that there was no remnants left of the fire. You restored it to look exactly as it did before the fire, but was there any conversation about leaving some sort of memorial to the fire or what happened, or leaving some remnant of the fire within the restoration project?
And that's such an interesting question because, for example, we work at the Museum of Mosul that was destroyed by Daesh. You know, those statues were destroyed and they exploded part of the museum, and we are in fact keeping a big hole as a remembrance of what happened at that time so the people of Mosul can remember that. So question to you.
Yes, but the trace of the fire, for me it was very, I had to work to, I often take this example, La Joconde. You can imagine the Joconde is destroyed one day, a part. You can't imagine to restore this part with modern painting or or you leave the trace. In the middle of the face, it's not possible. As for me, Notre-Dame is a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece. So I didn't want it to see balafre, cicatrice, you know, on the face.
You don't want to keep a scar.
Yes, so but I keep the traces of the fire above the vaults, in the wall who support the roof. But nobody can see this stone, but these stones has been restored in the state just after the fire. So it's a very, and perhaps in some view I show a few minutes, you saw the wall. And there is just one thing very, very symbolic I kept. When I walked in the cathedral just after the fire, I saw that, yes, here, you can see the wall here. It's completely restored just after the fire, the same. But before the fire, it was a very a wonderful wall. Here it's more sensitive. And to finish, the symbol I saw, it was from the roof, above the statue of the Virgin and the Christ. The Christ is in the arms of his mother, and I don't know why, I don't know how, but from the vaults you had a little hole, and from this hole fall down in the hand of the Christ leads. It's a when I saw that, I thought, but it's not possible, it's a miracle. So we decide to keep these leads in the end of the Christ, but you can see, you have really to approach you of the statue, but it's the only thing in the cathedral, but other parts are completely restored.
So thank you so much, Philippe. I think that's why also we want a museum of the cathedral to learn all those stories. There are many, many of them. I have to say it's such an extraordinary project that it will keep inspiring every restoration project that we do, obviously at World Monuments Fund, but any restorer around the world. So many techniques. I mean, first, fire prevention. Now we know so much more. It's the #1 threat to heritage. Use of latex, as Philippe explains, that was really extraordinary, how to clean the space, and so many more techniques that have been developed, experimented at Notre-Dame. So I really want to thank our speakers for their great intervention. Sorry that we didn't have much time to speak. Thank you to the Museum of Fine Arts for welcoming this lecture. Thank you to all of you for taking some of your afternoon. So if you want to continue learning more about Notre-Dame, you can join the Friends of Notre-Dame. If you want to be focused on it, I highly encourage you to go and visit at your next trip to Paris. And you can, of course, join also the Friends of World Monuments Fund. There are many of them. And but we do those kind of projects all around the world. And we need everybody to join and participate in this movement of like-minded individuals who want to preserve those places that tell something about what makes us human. You know, they resonate with us, and they teach us appreciation for different cultures, from different people who lived in other geographies or other eras. So thank you all for your appreciation. Thank you for your coming.